Hey y'all, today we're talking about a piece of gear that is near and dear to my heart, the Digitech Whammy Pedal. We're going to be talking about the 4th and 5th generation specifically and the differences between them. The Digitech Whammy Pedal was the first piece of professional gear that I got personally, or professional quality gear. I had my first electric guitar, which was a SX Paul Reed Smith copy that I'd bought from a local pawn shop for $100. I had a solid state little like 20 watt amp that I'd gotten from my local music shop, probably for about $100 too. But I knew I wanted to sound like Tom Morello. Go back and listen to the first Rage Against the Machine album, all the Rage Against the Machine's albums. This is a huge part of Tom Morello's sound. So the Whammy pedal was introduced in the 80s, but in my opinion, the most important year as far as this pedal being introduced to the masses is 1992. In 1992, Rage Against the Machine came out with their first album. The big hit, the big song you probably know off of it is Killing in the Name. The guitar solo on that song is the Digitech Whammy pedal. If you ever wondered how does he get that sound, it's the Whammy pedal. That was the first song that kind of drew me towards the Whammy pedal. But there's a lot of use of that pedal on this album, on albums following by Rage Against the Machine, and on Audio Slave albums, which was a band that Tom Morello was in after Rage Against the Machine. I can't think of a band that's been as popular and used the Whammy pedal as much as Rage Against the Machine. I think at this point, Rage Against the Machine is probably responsible for more sales of Whammy pedals than anyone else. The version of the Whammy pedal that I saw around the most for a long time is the Whammy 4. So, for a long time, this is the one you saw. If you looked at a Whammy pedal anywhere, this is the one you were seeing. This seemed to be the one where they mass-produced it the most. They realized, hey, Tom Morello's playing this, we gotta produce a lot of these. You don't see the ones before this quite as much, even still. This being a little bit older, you don't see them around as much as you used to. And a big note on these, which I'll go over how to tell the difference between this and a newer one here in a few minutes. But a big note on these, if you are buying one, make sure it comes with the power supply. I think there are options out there that you can find for a power supply for these, but it's kind of a headache and they're not super readily available. Make sure it comes with the power supply. And if it doesn't have the power supply with it, how can you be sure that it works? Because you can't just plug any 9-volt into this. It's its own thing. It's its own specific wall wart that you got to get for the 4th generation Whammy pedal. Now, what made the 5th generation Whammy pedal, like this, so cool, on top of being true bypass, because the old one's buffered bypass, a lot of people talk about these having a lot of tone suck. This one's true bypass, and it's just a regular 9-volt power supply that it can use. These still came with a power supply, I think, but you can use this with just your regular Pedal Power 2 Plus that you've got powering your pedal board, which made this a huge upgrade. On top of that, this has polyphonic pitch shifting, whereas this one's very monophonic. And that's where the noticeable difference and what you prefer is going to start to vary. quick crash course on telling the difference between the 4th generation and the 5th generation whammy pedal. So this one's the 5th. One quick tell, if it's got the switch. So this is chords mode and classic mode. And the rubber on the pedal itself, the expression pedal, it has whammy embossed into the middle of the pedal. The older one, the 4th generation, it's kind of almost like a gravelly texture. Just has Digitech here in the center. It still says whammy off to the side. No switch up here. I mentioned the classic and chords mode on here. So, because the old one, the 4th generation, is monophonic, it glitches out in all sorts of weird ways when you play more than one note at the same time. So if I try to play like a major chord or something, it really glitches out in this, it's kind of a cool way. You'll hear like Radiohead, Johnny Greenwood used one of these on, I think it was Just, and as he plays the riff, there's notes ringing out together, and it's this weird glitchiness. To me, it's the strangest thing to compare it to, but it's like the sound of ceramic plates clanking together. On the new one, when it's in chords mode, you don't really get any glitchiness. It tracks really well. When you go into classic mode, it is trying to emulate the old one with its glitchiness. However, it doesn't quite nail it. Essentially, between these two pedals, you have 3 different versions of each sound. Because you have the old one in all its monophonic glory. You have the new one in chords mode where it's polyphonic, it tracks well, it behaves right. And then the classic mode, which is kind of halfway between. It still glitches out, kind of funky, but it's not like the old one. And it's not just the octave effects on these that are different. Whether or not it's super noticeable or not, they're all the effects on them are a little bit different. The one that stuck out to me is the detune mode. Detune mode on the whammy pedal is basically a chorus, but without the movement. You know, when you have a chorus pedal, there's almost a waviness to it. This is detuning the guitar, so it's giving you both your unaffected signal and a detuned version of the signal, but it's not adding any modulation. However, on the old one, on the 4th gen, something I remember noticing when I first got one of these, although I didn't notice, or I didn't know the terms of why it was doing it. This almost does like a slat backy thing. If you turn it all the way, there's a shallow and a deep detune mode. If you turn it to the deep and you put the pedal all the way forward, it's going to be the highest setting. It's not super massive, the amount of time, or it's not like it has a bunch of repeats or anything, but you can notice, like, if you hit one quick stab on the guitar, it's almost kind of a... The harmony settings, they're smoother on the new one. I'll say that. If I was going strictly by the harmony settings, except for the octave effects in the harmony side, I'll talk about that in a second. If I was going just by the harmony settings, the fifths, the fourths, all that, I would say go with the 5th generation all the way. It's just smoother, and I would leave it on chords mode all the time. To be honest, this is what I keep on my pedal board. I keep it in chords mode all the time. If I want the glitchiness, I'm going to figure out a way to work the older one into my signal. So all in all, I don't think you need both pedals. Honestly, for most people watching this video, the new one is probably the way to go. Very pedal board friendly in that you can power it with most normal power supplies. You don't need to get the weird wall wart and figure out a way to have that plugged into your board. It's true bypass. I don't let that make or break me on a pedal, but it being true bypass is a nice bonus. You've got the classic mode on here if you want to get, somewhat glitchy. It's not exactly the same, but it still does something. There's also the bass whammy in this generation. It's got some different harmonies on it that might be better suited for bass. I think it's got a couple different octaves on it as well. I could have sworn that they made a bass whammy in these, but I can't find a single one. So that might be the Mandela effect. They might not have made a bass whammy in the 4th gen. But there's bass players that have used these for sure. I don't think you need both of these. However, if you really dig the whammy sound, it might be worth hunting down one of these so you can feel the difference between them. There is a difference. I own one of each because I like the sound of this. The glitchiness in these is kind of iconic. Those Rage Against the Machine songs, like I said, Radiohead is a real good example. And there's just something kind of guttural and cool about how this glitches out on the octave settings. When you play more than one note, you can really get it to glitch out in funky ways. There are a lot of other options at this point to achieve whammy pedal-like effects. The Electro-Harmonix pitchfork comes to mind. That's a very popular one. I haven't used one personally, but based on the number of people that have told me good things about them, it's probably a pretty good option. I own a Line 6 HX Stomp. That actually has versions of each of these built into it, so you can get the whammy 4 glitchiness out of that. If you already have a Helix, whether it be the HX Stomp, the full-blown Helix Native, you can get some sounds that way. The Pitch Factor from Eventide, that has these sounds and a lot more built into it. There's some other options out there, but I think the Digitech is kind of the quintessential one. I don't feel limited by it when I use it. It feels like there's settings that I want that I know I can go to, and I never think, I wish I had this sound or this sound. I like limitations in pedals and things like that. I feel like if I just have a bunch of menus, I'm just going to keep scrolling through menus. Whereas if I have a knob that's just like, all right, here's 20 preset modes, use the 20 preset modes, I'm going to spend less time fiddling with the pedal and more time just landing on a mode, using it, and moving on to the next thing.